Good evening and welcome to Whiskey Wednesday. There's a lot going on in the news today, but tonight we're going to talk leadership, censorship, and how diversity and inclusion is important to all of these discussions. Joining me is the ninja Dr. Jason Pittman. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
The ninja. How are you, my friend?
I am doing excellent. How are you, Dr. Dan Ford?
You know, trying to determine whether or not I have COVID. Feeling a little bit run down. Not actually joking.
No. I get it, dude.
My chiropractor called on Monday and canceled the appointment and said, I've tested positive for COVID. And I'm like, oh, damn. I saw you 3 times last week. So, going back and forth, I don't have a fever. Breaths per minute aren't really where I want them to be. Had a rapid test and it's come back negative, but it's a rapid test. Maybe it's too early. Extremely exhausted. And, interesting that I go back and forth with chills and sweating, but no temperature. Like I have not had my temperature above 97.9. So while there is an alternative, based on my WebMD research skills, could also be low blood sugar, since I've been trying to do intermittent fasting and not eat till about 2:00 in the afternoon. So there is a intersection there.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, I'm still exhausted. Go back and forth.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that, life is a set of complex variables, right? And we know as scientists that, you start monkeying with more than one variable at a time. It's hard to track it. With intermittent fasting, you may, if you've been doing it long enough, slipping into ketosis while you're fasting, and you'll get the keto flu.
Yeah, it hasn't been often, which is why the blood sugar thing kind of makes sense, right? The other aspect is, constantly wearing a mask. Whenever I wear a mask for more than, a cup of coffee, so to speak, it always messes with my sinuses. I come back, I'm stuffy, all this kind of stuff, and not really a fan. But, I still do it because, that while all those people, while there are some people out there thinking it doesn't do anything, I go, I think it does something. At least the defensive depth. I mean, when you take a look at how different viruses and bacteria attach themselves and travel, it's not attaching itself to something small. It's something bigger than itself. And then these different types of cloth would catch it. So, I wear it.
I'd like to remind the people that espouse that opinion that a mask doesn't work, that we used to think that. And we used to kill a lot of people in surgical theaters until we discovered this thing called germ theory. And we finally figured out that, there's little things that you can't see. And if you do a couple simple things like wash your hands, don't touch stuff that you shouldn't be touching regularly, and then touch like your eyes, your mouth, so forth and so on, and you wear a mask when you're in close proximity like that, guess what happens? People don't get sick.
Right. If masks didn't work, then why, when you go into surgery or you're with a dentist, do they wear a mask?
Right.
All right. So I digress. But I really want to get into, because I am 100% against censorship in all forms. Now, I make a couple of exceptions to this. And that is, in the event that you want to talk about directly causing harm to another group or individuals, that's it. And I mean direct, like you literally say, you all need to go hang Vice President Pence. Guess what? You should be banned. And as far as I'm concerned, if you say something like that against a public official along those lines, then the Secret Service should be, taking a visit to your, wherever you're at. Like that is, full stop, not acceptable. And outside of that, like if you want to say racist stuff, you know what? Go ahead. In my opinion, you're an idiot. Especially in today's age, like there's no room in my world for people that I want to associate with, but I want to know who you are and I want to keep an eye on you. And so that way I ensure that my friends and family and colleagues don't get brainwashed by your sentiments, but I want you front and center. Like TK and I talked about it last Sunday. I'd give the head of the KKK 60 minutes every day on, C-SPAN or whatever, and let this fool talk. But outside of that, and if you're promoting any type of sex trafficking, specifically children, like those things are like, no, those are felonies and you deserve to die, a million deaths.
Well, exactly. And I think we would agree that for most of the things that you and I would argue any reasonable, intelligent person would agree are outside the bounds of what should be considered free speech. There's more than likely already some law somewhere that you're going to run afoul of. So I don't need an extra framework of laws, nor do I need a company trying to act as if they're law enforcement in that case.
Yeah, and my test of this is not my test. It literally is called the Brandenburg Test. It's a Supreme Court decision that talks about what is considered insightful speech. And, as much as what I would have loved to see the president say some things differently, it doesn't meet the legal standard of insightful speech according to Brandenburg. Just like Representative Maxine Waters earlier saying that if they are a Trump supporter in the Trump cabinet, you should surround them, get a group of people, make them uncomfortable, get in their face and push back. That also is protected under the basically it doesn't meet the criteria under Brandenburg, right? Even though I think she's absolutely wrong for saying it.
Sure.
So then I started thinking, with all of this censorship that's going on, I wonder how many people that work for me, that have worked for me in the past, that are employees that I may have come across that didn't work directly for me. I wonder how many of them feel like their voice matters. And did I do something that might make them feel as if their voice didn't matter?
Right. Yeah, I think as aspiring leaders, right, if we can phrase ourselves that way, there's no room for ridicule. Like, I don't want somebody necessarily ridiculed for what they have to say. I want a critical evaluation of what they say. And I want to know what people think and have to say. It's actually really important to me as a human being, let alone as a leader. And the idea that we should suppress a view that we don't agree with is, by definition, fascism.
100%. Because I want to know, even the lowest employee on the totem pole, they have a different opinion and a mindset. And guess what? Those people that are low on the totem pole are doing the type of work that is likely the most impactful to your customers. Mm-hmm. They are the ones that are interacting with them directly, and they have a different perspective. I want to know it. And I think as leaders, we need to consider all opinions. That doesn't mean that we need to act on all opinions. And I think there's a big distinction between those two things.
Well, right. This is why a lot of what's going on, to me, amounts to what has been for a long time in this country. We have a long history of this as a culture of anti-intellectualism, because we conflate consideration with agreement, and those aren't the same thing. You should consider all points. That doesn't mean you find them valid, and that sure as shit doesn't mean you agree with them. but that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen. I would argue that perhaps that's a large part of what's wrong with the fabric of our culture is we just don't take the time to listen to each other. We'd rather just shout somebody down.
Well, and yes, I agree. And it's so funny because I was watching, I enjoy Ben Shapiro quite a bit, mainly because I think he does a really good job of stating the facts. And I don't agree with everything that he says, right? But which is fine. I mean, that's a healthy, discourse. You want those kind of things. But it was interesting because he had on a number of people who were Democrats that voted for Biden, and they had asked them the question, are you inclusive? And then they started going through all these things. Well, what about this? Oh, no. They don't matter. So it was everything was inclusive and everything can be negotiated as long as you agree with them. But if you didn't agree with them, then no, you can't be included and we have no room for negotiation. Well, that's not how this works, right? So let's take the aspect of whatever we're calling it today, global warming. What is it? What's the new catchphrase? It's not global warming, it's climate change. All right. We can negotiate as to what, or we can disagree on what steps we should be taking. We could disagree on where we think the carbon emissions should be, but there has to be a way to where we can get because I think all sides agree our carbon emissions need to be lowered. Well, one side might think it needs to be lowered by 50%, and the other side might say, no, it only needs to be 30%. Well, we should probably be able to figure out a way to get to 40%. Like, it's not that much of a difference because we both agree in principle we need to lower our carbon emissions. And this is all hypothetical. But in this particular video, it was, nope, it has to be this way, or you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're a racist. I mean, that's literally what I heard in each one of these things. And the room for negotiation is, well, there is no room.
Right. See, and so
I'm overly generalizing.
Oh yeah. Sure. Well, come on, man. I mean, we're having a conversation over the internet, right? I mean,
no one's paying attention to this.
Oh, come on, man. See, the part of the problem I've started to develop is, like, for instance, take this Trump situation with his impeachment today. I haven't actually followed it closely, so I don't know exactly what the articles of impeachment were and what the votes were. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is this idea that if I don't agree, you just said it. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, you're a Nazi, or you're a communist, or you're this or you're that. And the problem I have is by calling somebody one of those things. Let's take Nazis, for instance, okay? Because it's a very poignant example, in my opinion. You're devaluing what that is, the history of it. So imagine, because I've talked to people that were in that. We've talked about it with TK and his opinion of it as being a war fighter, right? People that were, grandfathers, for instance, for our generation that were part of that war, and they saw that firsthand. Listen, man, do you understand the gravity of being part of a culture that killed in excess of 6 million people because they disagreed with them? And you're calling somebody that likes black coffee when you like creamer a Nazi. Like, what are you doing, man? And so if you truly despise somebody because of what they represent, trying to deplatform them by labeling them this, Nazi, communist, whatever, actually doesn't serve your purpose if you stand back and evaluate it. What you should be doing is trying to deconstruct their points and point out where they're flawed, instead of just lumping them into a group that you think is socially vile. And I'm not saying they're vile or not. That's not my point. My point is Trump's not a Nazi. And by calling him a Nazi, you're actually missing the point of why I think and would agree with some people that he's a horrible person and a horrible president. Deal with those facts.
Yeah, and this is where I get into like, all right, so I'm 100% against Google, Apple, and Amazon banning Parler. Now, equally so, an Idaho internet provider chose to block Facebook and Twitter in retaliation. I am equally opposed to that. It's not. I mean, maybe, and this is where I really struggle with, because my feelings of Elon Musk, and so when Elon Musk comes out and says these companies are wrong, and he literally went to the whole aspect of the roots to Facebook, which was basically rating females on campus from what Zuckerberg used to do. He's like, come on, how did we go from this? And you think now this is okay? Like, I really struggle with, when I'm in agreement with Elon Musk. Right? And Elon Musk has come out going, you all are completely wrong for doing this.
You're crazy.
Yeah.
You're absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I just go, okay, so I've listened quite a bit to I think she is the chief policy officer at Parler. And she said, look, we went into this business and decided that we weren't going to set up all these algorithms to scan all of the stuff. She's used artificial intelligence, but she really means machine learning. I'll let that slide. So her point was that aspect of taking every single thing that everyone says, running it through this algorithm to determine whether or not it was hate speech or whatever, and then therefore linking that to an individual, and then us knowing what individuals said what, did what, through an algorithm, we felt was an invasion of privacy, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to rely on self-policing, that if someone felt something was bad, we relied upon a report, and then we investigated, because that's what we think decent humans are supposed to do. And the interesting thing is, and let's I'm going to assume I believe her, because I have no reason not to. So she essentially says she gets an email the Wednesday before from Amazon saying that, hey, you need to look into this stuff because this is really, really, really bad. Your platform is allowing the incitement of these things. So there was no link as to what, like, what did they want us to look into? So I replied back almost immediately, got something reply back on Thursday saying, hey, thanks for the reply. As far as we're concerned, you've remediated this matter, carry about your business. Friday, I get a new email saying we're going to discontinue you. Now, if that is true, Amazon loses their court case.
Yeah. Well, they should. So here, let me give you my argument, and then I know you have your McDonald's argument, which I think is poignant. I'm going to give you my twist on this from my academic view. Okay, it's very specific. We're in a situation because of the pandemic where state public schools at all levels are forcing their students to attend online. That presupposes two things: that those students have computers, and that those computers have some measure of, let's say, equal access to the internet.
So just to interrupt for a moment, because I don't know how it is in North Carolina, but in the locations where I'm at, only the latter of what you said, I think, is true, because they said if you don't have one, I know many, because I got the emails, if you don't have a computer, then click here to schedule the pickup of your Chromebook.
I'm aware that that's true in some places. Okay. That is not true here in North Carolina.
Which is perfectly reasonable. That it's not universal. Yeah. So
well, right. We got 50 states, and they're fairly diverse. If you want to talk about diversity, right?
How dare you?
Hey, man, come on. We'll get there. So So that presupposes those two things, and I think we can agree as reasonable people that that's going to be true for some people and not true in one or both for some people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is a state-funded organization, public school. Okay.
Agreed.
So I would argue that inclusive of that, I snuck that word in, that is tantamount to public works, just like water and power. And so, particularly with water, we've identified that as a basic human service that you cannot be denied. Right? So, the problem I have is this. If we're going to allow the internet, which, as you pointed out in the pre-show, Amazon controls 50% of it. If we're going to allow a company that represents half of the internet at large to arbitrarily, and I'll make a point of this, decide who gets that access and who doesn't, that runs afoul of public works. And if you're a fan of that, I really struggle to understand that. I really do, because what you're allowing a loophole now implicitly where somebody can arbitrarily decide who gets water and who doesn't.
You're absolutely right. And I'm reminded it back when we were doing This Life in Tech of you making the argument that the internet should be a public utility. And at that time, I'm pretty sure I said, I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah.
And mainly because I looked at it as the distinction between broadband access at the time versus cellular access, which could also have broadband capabilities. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to make a distinction between the two. But now here we are now in 2021. I don't think there's a distinction between the two. And that I do believe that the internet should be a regulated like a utility, especially if the many public schools are relying upon the internet in order to teach children, and even possibly young adults because of, public, universities. Therefore, it meets the definition, in my opinion, of, as you mentioned, a utility, public works, and you cannot squelch speech in utilizing a utility.
All right, so here's the deeper point. Because fuck you, Amazon, you hypocrites. Amazon owns Twitch. Twitch is the prominent, not even close, video game streaming service. Okay.
Amazon owns the Washington Post.
That is true, but with Twitch in particular, okay, Twitch has a long history of arbitrarily, permanently banning people for seemingly no offense.
I'm shocked I haven't been banned yet because we're live streaming to Twitch.
Okay. On the other hand, not banning people that clearly violate the terms of service. To wit, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, there was a young girl streaming live to the internet. So there's no COPA regulations on this, keep in mind, right? Disrobes, and I can see her kidneys for 30 minutes. You understand my implication? She got a 3-day ban, and that's it.
How old is she?
I didn't ask, and I didn't card her, dude. I'm reading the news.
Right. Well, what I mean by that is she's younger than 18. It is child pornography.
Right. Well, let's assume in this case, the best case, she's over 18, so it's not child porn, but there's no guarantee there's not children watching. My point is this. She got a 3-day ban for that, and that's it. I've personally seen people that I don't necessarily agree with. This cuts back to the main gist of this. Let's say dancing, but fully clothed. There's some body part movements. They got a permanent ban. Explain that. Nobody can, because it's arbitrary, and it cuts the hypocrisy of Amazon as the owner deciding who gets what public service and who doesn't. And in America, that cannot stand. That cannot stand.
I agree. And I wonder if we're at a time where, because I'll back up for a moment, because TK and I went over and I did my Constitution series, right?
Yeah.
And the First Amendment is paramount to this country, and many people confuse what the First Amendment means. The First Amendment essentially says you have the right to say whatever you want without being, without any reprisal from the government. Okay.
Right.
That doesn't mean you aren't free from all consequence. But I think now, because the internet has become such a utility in public works, it needs to be extended there. I'm not looking to hold Facebook or Twitter or any of these platforms accountable if hate speech occurs and people use that for the incitement of riots. That's not their fault. I think they should do what they believe is in the best interests of their subscribers. Like, I have an issue that President Trump was banned from Facebook and Twitter. I wouldn't have a problem with him being banned on January 20th, 2021 at 12:01 p.m.
Right.
Because now he is a private citizen at that time. Do with what you want at that point, right? I feel that's where I draw the line, because I do believe a lot of the stuff he has said is worthy of it's violation of their terms of service, right? I have no issues with that. But when you don't agree with someone, if they didn't try to have a felony created, if they didn't say, go kick someone's, butt, go beat these people up, go hang these people, I think the Supreme Court pretty much ruled in the First Amendment, and this comes with Hustler, that you can't legislate taste.
That's right. Listen, when I worked on Wilshire Boulevard in the film industry, I used to drive by the Hustler Tower almost on a daily basis, and I would always, hell yeah, Larry Flint. Not because I read Hustler, not because I was necessarily a fan of their product, but that's a man that believed in a conviction, that espoused his right to have bad taste, to be disagreeable. That's American by definition. And so this is the nuance in this, right? Some people are going to listen to this at some point in the future and be like, well, you don't like capitalism. You don't like private companies. No, listen, I support the right in a capitalistic free society of a private company to do whatever they want with their business. But that's why it's important that we define this as a public work, because that's how it's functioning now in society.
So let me ask you this,
please.
All right. So the bakers in Colorado, were they within their right to not bake that wedding cake for a gay couple? Now, before you answer, because I always think it's disingenuous when someone says, "What do you think?" before they tell you what they think. I think they were absolutely wrong. I think if you're offering a service to the public, of which they were, you cannot discriminate based on any, protected class. And I think that they were absolutely wrong in not providing their service, because evidently this person, this baker, was known for their wedding cake, abilities. And so they decided, okay, we're just not going to make wedding cakes at all. Okay, fine, whatever. And yeah, sure, that particular couple was definitely trying to find, they sought someone to finally say no. But regardless of that, I think that baker was wrong. They could have done it a different way and said, look, we'll do it, but we probably won't be able to provide, because our heart's not going to be in this. We would rather refer you to someone else. But if you really want us to do it, okay. But I think they were wrong in not doing it. And so I believe then at that point, it's not like, the aspect of no shirt, no shoes, no service, because that's an aspect of you are violating the terms of service, so to speak, and that you're being unruly. You're not what our community desires. But in this case, that was not this. This was no different than me telling a person of color, I'm not going to serve you food. I feel like that's the same thing. So, but that's my opinion. What say you?
I disagree, but I'll qualify. I think I don't think they're legally culpable in any way. I think it's their right as a private company to choose who to serve when and how. I disagree with it as a business person. They're fools. You should shut your mouth and leave your politics out of it and just bake cakes, dude. Like
100% agreed. But the Supreme Court agrees with me, so I'm good with it both.
fair play, fair play.
But even still, but then I think you hit the more important part. My job as of being in a for-profit company is to make profit. And now if I choose to not make cakes for the LGBTQ, hopefully I got all the stuff in there. Plus. Okay, plus. Yeah. I think they're fools, right? And this is where I think the Amazons, the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world are wrong, because eventually there's going to be a Parler, and Parler will come back online. Parler's not going to be banning the left. So they will have the potential of 100% of the population, whereas a Facebook and a Twitter will be less than, because they've alienated a segment. Yeah. And I want 100% of the segment.
This is the problem with intersectionality is it's inevitable. Everybody's going to take their turn getting canceled. Yeah. And you know how I feel about that. When you cancel people, you're robbing a human being of their chance at redemption. But before I go off on that tangent, let me ask you a question, and I'll give you my answer first. Under the same context of question, should we compel Chick-Fil-A to be open on Sunday? Because they're not for religious reasons, and they're very clear about that. I don't think you have any means to compel them. I think they're foolish as a business, but that's their business, not mine. I don't run it.
I look at them being a little bit different because they set their hours up front, and everyone knows what they are, and that's the way they're choosing to do business. So I look at that being slightly different because they're not saying, I'm not going to serve you Monday through Saturday because you happen to be LGBTQ or someone over, you're a senior citizen, you're a person of color. They're not doing that. They're just saying, look, we're only open Monday through Saturday. Now I think that they're, again, like, hey, I see the lines at Chick-fil-A. Like, there's never been a time when I've ever gone to a Chick-fil-A where the line for the drive-through is like a 20-minute wait. Like, fast food's not supposed to be a 20-minute wait. If I wanted a 20-minute wait, I'll go to a restaurant, order my beer, and wait for my buffalo wings because I like those things to be cooked for 20 minutes. So, I like them crispy. So, why would I go, so I think they're foolish because I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table. But you know what? They're saying, look, we're only open Monday through Saturday.
See, and here's the thing. I think if you're sincerely tolerant, you shouldn't care why they're not open on Sunday. Who gives a shit? Yeah. It's a private business. It's their business. I don't care. Yeah. I just know that I can't get Chick-fil-A on Sunday.
Yep. Which is great because I always say to the kids on a Sunday, hey, let's go to Chick-fil-A. And they're like, oh, yeah. And they're like, oh, it's Sunday. I'm like, oh, well, sorry. I was willing to take you today.
Dude, I get Mrs. and Baby Pittman at least once a month on that one. Oh, at least.
I love it. But this is I think where the big distinction is. Chick-fil-A is not discriminating against any class. They're literally not serving anyone on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? That's an important distinction.
Whereas Amazon is saying, I'm not going to serve you because basically you allowed President Trump to have an account and all these people did some bad stuff. This internet service provider in Idaho, you're equally as wrong. You can, like, what Idaho is doing is like what China does. And I think what I just recently read, Uganda is asking to be done. Like, that is not good. By the way, Google, Apple, Amazon, you're no different.
No, I got this conversation with some students the other day about Apple's privacy stance. And I know you and I agree on this because we've talked about it before. Come on, man. Don't be fooled. They don't want you to feel private. They don't want anybody else monetizing your data. They're kicking the competition off of their platform.
All right, so agreed. 100% agreed. So check this out. Okay. All right. Let's say we're Apple for a moment. we're going to make a stance against Parler, but we weren't willing to make a stance against the San Bernardino terrorist actions.
That's right.
We're not going to help the FBI and other law enforcement organizations to investigate child pornography rings, child sex trafficking rings, child abductions because of encryption. We're going to take that stance. But Parler, nope, you're worse than that. Like that. Put that into that context. Parler is worse than helping law enforcement get rid of child pornography rings, to get rid of child sex trafficking, to investigate true terrorist actions like the San Bernardino event.
Right.
See, I don't know how to explain that.
No. See, and it's so patently obvious, man. If you're paying attention and you're rational, when you just fast backwards, even a year or two, what group of Congress people were really seething about big tech? It was the Democrats. And so if you're running one of these big tech companies and you don't want broken up and regulated, you're going to appease the people that are witch hunting you. Like, it's so, dude, I've read comic books with deeper plots.
So, you make a great point, which I'm gonna try and find it. You remember it because I wrote it on the 4th of July in 2015. Mm-hmm. See if I can find it, which was this is where people tend to lose out about history.
They do, man. We can go back to, while you're looking for that, I'll fill some airtime for us. It's so blatantly obvious if you have any cursory knowledge of the way large organisms have functioned. And so what's going on with this labeling of groups with names so that they become detestable? For instance, the Nazis did that. It was called blood libel. And what they did is they labeled groups with certain terms, words, or phrases. The Jews had this done to them explicitly, that drove the general population to detest them based on the word itself. And it created schisms across the societal fabric.
It did.
That's not one person or a cabal of people doing that. That's a cultural movement based on language.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll read this out because I think it's important. So the title of this article, and I wrote it, and it was published on July 3rd, 2015 at CyberZen or cybersecurityzen.com. Encryption, not just our right, but our heritage. So the 4th of July is upon us. This holiday reminds me of a day when I was in high school and learned that I'm directly related to one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Oliver Wolcott. I became very interested in how the United States was formed and the rights our founding fathers framed in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Now, fast forward today, where I'm the chief security officer of Silent Circle, a tech company thrust into the spotlight regarding encryption, the crypto wars, and our inalienable rights to privacy. Considering the natural lust for power so inherent in man, I fear the thirst of power will prevail to oppress the people. That was by George Mason. For those in the United States, the crypto wars appear to have ended when the Supreme Court ruled Gore lost the presidential election, as he was a strong supporter for a key escrow system. In October 2014, FBI Director James Comey asked Congress to allow for backdoors and encryption systems, while President Obama has advocated that the absence of backdoors is a problem. Friends, colleagues, and fellow citizens, a crypto battle was won, but the war is not over. It is just beginning. In the United States, Coffin v. United States established the presumption of innocence of persons accused of crimes. Law enforcement would request new laws from Congress that would allow for backdoors to be used under suspicion of committing crimes. President Obama argues that bad actors are better at using services that make it difficult to track. President Obama further advocates to have the ability to track in a way that is legal, conforms with due process, rule of law, and presents oversight. Then that's a capability that we have to preserve. As Jefferson points out, rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. In addition, Madison stated the rights of persons and the rights of property are the objects for the protection of which government was instituted. In the world of 2015, these rights are not upheld by the U.S. government, as seen in the OPM hack. Therefore, to continue to protect these rights, we must fight for encryption algorithms free from backdoors. Encryption must be used throughout the formation of the United States. Jefferson himself used I'm always mispronouncing this, but the Vigenère cipher to communicate with Madison, Adams, Monroe, Livingston, and others. Jefferson used encryption for official and unofficial communications and stated that use of encrypted communications was a means to keep matters merely personal to ourselves. In other words, Jefferson believed in the right to privacy. Otherwise, the use of encryption would not be required. Based on multiple court decisions, the right to privacy is derived from the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. According to Frumkin, the rights to privacy can be broken into three parts: the right to autonomous choice regarding non-intimate matters, the right to be left alone, and the right to autonomous choice regarding intimate matters. The landmark case of Griswold versus Connecticut decided that U.S. citizens do in fact have a right to privacy, and this right is the right to protection from government intrusion. Ironic in that on June 29, 2015, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court ruled that NSA may resume the mass collection of American domestic phone records. As U.S. citizens, we have the right to be left alone. We have the right to choose what is sensitive in our communications and the right to be protected from government intrusion. Silent Circle provides this means to assist in the masses ensuring our right to privacy and a secure and easy-to-use methodology. It's my belief it is our patriotic duty to implement and use technology that uphold our right to privacy.
Our stocks were zero, dude. You don't need the ad.
Yeah. Well, I was just reading it verbatim. But still today, It holds true. Those people that want to believe that all of a sudden today, Democrats are in favor of big tech, wait till the next terrorist-like bombing. Yeah. Wait till the next time the FBI wants a break in the encryption. Elon Musk tweets out, everyone, stop using Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and use Signal. It's an unbreakable encryption algorithm unless there's a flaw in the software implementation. The encryption is sound. That, is while people want to believe the Democrats are so much in favor of our security and freedoms. 2015 was not that long ago.
No. You can almost call it recent.
Yeah. Who was President Obama's vice president?
Oh, I think his name was Biden.
Yeah, pretty sure, right? And wasn't the Obama administration the ones that were pushing the use of facial recognition technology and drone surveillance throughout law enforcement?
Yeah, I love the turn of phrase, right? We're going to stop collecting metadata. That's true. You're just going to start collecting all the data. Like, okay, dude, I get it.
I'm telling you, this is big tech did this as soon as the Georgia senator election had come up, because they did not want the Democratic Party coming after them.
Nope.
Basically, this was all done as a favor to say, please do not come after us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listen, man, and I don't think there's some vast conspiracy. I think it's an observation. I think it's an observation of the world, the way the world works.
Actually, I think there was a conspiracy because I predicted Facebook would be broken up, and if the Senate senators in Georgia had gone Republican, it might have. And they did this to just make sure the Democrats don't do it. Otherwise, Facebook would have been broken up. They did this to purely not make one of my predictions come true. They're watching. They're listening. Sometimes I got to keep my predictions to myself. Otherwise, the forces of evil wind up using them.
Evildoers.
Yeah. Oh, so, I get right back to this aspect of, if you're going to squelch speech, then how can you truly be considered a leader?
Right. I think it is a very timely and poignant example, because look, this is what I understand, but I don't understand, right? If you think the current administration is really bad and it's this and it's that, whatever, okay? How can you turn around and basically act the same way? Because it is the same thing. It really is. Like, for everything you can say that the Trump administration has done bad, and they've done some bad and some good, okay? But if you're really anti-Trump, why are you turning around and acting like that character that you're creating, that straw man that you're constructing, acts? That's what I don't understand about this. If you really think, and you're sincere and you're articulate in how this administration is bad, then you should be doing the exact opposite of what you're doing.
So I'm going to go. I'm
funded, not defunded.
Yeah, I'm going to go a slight step further than that. If you were so against the Trump administration throughout the entire time where your taxes were lowered, you should be taking that money and giving it to charity, from what that difference was between the Trump administration, the Obama administration, and your first and second stimulus checks should also go to charity or sent back to the federal government. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite.
Hey, listen, man, my pension's up 40% for the second year in a row.
Well, right. But that's how far I'm willing to say, if you are so adamant that Trump is horrible and his tax breaks benefited you, then you should take a look and do your taxes based on what it was in the 2016, which was President Obama's last year in office, because of December 31st. So whatever your taxes were for the fiscal year 2016, and under those laws, any benefits you receive from 2017 through 2020, if you receive that benefit, then you should be donating that benefit to charity or write a check back to the Treasury Department for the IRS and give back that money. Right. Same thing. The way I feel with those stimulus checks, because that came from the Trump administration.
Right. Exactly. The attitude is so infantile by definition, man. Right? Like, you've had little kids, and you have a little kid. I have a little kid, and when they get scared and they think there's monsters in the bed, they don't realize, because they're not infants, but they're little kids, right? They don't realize that really all you have to do is go turn the light on. We're adults. You should be wanting to turn the lights on. You should be wanting to illuminate society, not darken it. No progress comes from silencing, canceling, and deplatforming people. You should be wanting to do the exact opposite and pointing out where there's weaknesses, where there's deficiencies, and where there's a possible better path forward. That's patriotism. That's courage. That's heroism.
Right. Yeah, and I should go so far as to say, as leaders, we are not, when someone says something that is ridiculous, that we shouldn't correct that. We shouldn't just allow that to go on, because that's our opportunity to teach. And as leaders, I think you have to be a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And this blows my mind how just a few weeks ago, a representative in Congress who opened it up and he closed off his sermon with amen and a woman. How does anyone think that's acceptable? Because amen has nothing to do with one's biological sex. It comes from Hebrew, right? Literally.
See,
and no one denounced that stupidity in the Democratic Party. So if you're to me, everyone that heard that said nothing to it, you're not a leader. You're literally sheep.
Well, I'll put it in the critical race theory, social justice warrior lexicon. You're an ableist.
Oh.
I don't think you grow because the bottle's heavy, dude.
No, it's not.
No, you're spot on, man. You are absolutely spot on. I think as a leader in this context, our role is to help people walk through the steps necessary to realize where they're right and where they're wrong. And when they're wrong, provide the safety net for them to confront that, because it's painful sometimes, and recover from it and find a path forward that's illuminated.
Right, because in this case, I'm not talking opinion, right? There's a difference between when there is a fact versus an opinion. So you have someone that works with you, and they don't like the course of which the business is heading. Okay, they can disagree, and I can simply say, I hear you, but it's my responsibility as the person whose head is on the chopping block to make the decision that I feel is best. And I heard you, and we can disagree, and we have two choices the way we can go about this. You can fall in line and help support me because I'm the one that's on the chopping block, or we can help you to find different set of employment. And that's okay for those things to happen. It's perfectly acceptable. You don't have to agree with those people that are put in a position of power, but you have two choices from an employment perspective. Support them, because if you don't, you're going to be fired anyway, right? So it's either support them or go look for new employment. But you should also feel that you were heard. And I believe that good leaders hear you, they recognize what they hear, and they tell you, well, I will consider your opinion. It does not mean that I require it.
Right.
So different from fact versus opinion.
Yeah. I had this conversation last semester with one of my colleagues. I don't remember what the circumstance was, but it ended up being a little contentious. And I voiced my opinion. I said my piece, and I was done. I'm not emotionally attached to it. I don't need to debate about it. And I sure as shit don't need to be right. And I think they were a little taken aback by that. And I explained, look, it's not that I'm dispassionate. It's not that I don't care. You asked me my opinion. I gave it to you. And for me, it's done. It's on you, because you're the leader, to do what you will. And I support you in that. I don't need to be right. And I don't need you to do what I want. You asked me my opinion. I gave it to you, and I moved on.
Right. When you worked with me at Silent Circle, we didn't go 100% of the direction that you wanted me to go in, but I 100% of the time took what you had to say into consideration. Sure. There were certain things that of information you didn't always have the direct knowledge of, but it's not like they were decisions that you completely disagreed with. It was just a difference of opinion. But that's that happens. It's people think that you have to agree with. No, a good leader doesn't want you to agree with them. They absolutely do want you, when the decision is made, to make it successful. And there's a big difference between those two things that I think many do not get. They will take it as such an affront that they walk out. Right. And this is why I'm so opposed to this Google union, because the union is being formed at Google because they want influence on what projects that Google will work on. Which, by the way,
made by committee.
No, which by the way, from one of TK's HR gurus, they won't get the protections because they're not. I mean, come on, how people tend to want to unionize because of workplace conditions. You're telling me you work for Google and you don't have good workplace conditions?
You're right. Right. What are we really talking about here, people? What are we talking about?
Yeah. I mean, Google is like one of the most sought after companies in the world to go work for. Why? Because their workplace conditions are penultimate. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's hard to categorize sometimes for me, man. It really is, because I don't have a frame of reference within which to analyze it. It's just so foreign to me that I might as well be an Inca watching the conquistadors come on shore, and I've never seen a galleon before, so I don't actually see it. You know what I mean? That's how strange it is to me sometimes. And look, I support people speaking up, right, to your point. But
I want it. I encourage it.
But as an adult, you have to understand the difference between somebody's asking me what I think, and I'm going to tell you what I think, and then I'm moving on, versus there's imminent harm or danger, and I need to act, even if nobody else will or everybody else disagrees with the action.
You know, many people think that being a leader means you're going to always make the popular decisions. I go so far as to say, as being the leader, you at best make your decisions result in 50% of it being popular, at best.
Here's to the point of that, right? And this comes from literature. The purpose of a king is to die. And this comes from Babylon, from the myth of Marduk. And so when there were actual human kings in Babylon, they had a ritual where this comes into the idea in the West, we have the Wicker Man.
What do you mean when there were human kings?
Well, hey, listen, man. There's these being called Anunnaki. Anyway, man. So this actually transfers into popular Western culture, at least through medieval Europe, with the Wicker Man.
Right.
And so the idea was that a king, as a leader, should be all-seeing, all-knowing in terms of how they lead the people. And so once a year, the people of Babylon would bring out the king and whip and beat him to remind him that he was not deity. He was, in fact, human and responsible for his own sins, so to speak, right? And so that metaphor translates into how we talk about constructing straw men or burning effigies. The purpose of the king is to die for the people because it's representative of an ideal. It's not to be a tyrant. It's not to wield their will arbitrarily like we're seeing now. It's to strive to lead people towards illumination.
Well said. You know, I go so far as to, earlier today, one of my colleagues was giving his presentation on leadership. And he invoked leadership as being the shepherd. And I'm reminded of this because you and I have spoke about, how leaders of countries have changed. Back in the days of Caesar, the leader rode at the front of the military. And today, they're very much at the back. But a shepherd is always kind of at the back. There'll be some sheep that get out ahead. The others don't even realize that they're following. But it's the shepherd that is constantly pushing those behind to keep moving forward. And that, in many ways, as you just mentioned, it's what a leader needs to do. Yeah. Let those that are your superstars get out there, because the other sheep are going to follow. The shepherd's there to make sure there's no one left behind.
Yeah, well articulated, man. That's really the role, right? It's to illuminate the path so that the people that aren't able to find it themselves can be on it. And look, man, that's life. Not everybody's going to make it. That's the way it is. You can't save everybody. You can try. You can do your best to save as many as possible and get them going. But not everybody's going to make it. Some will self-select out because it's not their path. Some will struggle and have to be cut or culled, if you prefer. But that's leadership to me, man. These kinds of things resonate me when I really step back and think about it. I had a long conversation with a student today that needed some live advice on how to negotiate their first real career job. They called me. They didn't call their uncle. They didn't call their brother. They didn't call their dad. They called me. I don't know why. I didn't ask. In that moment, this person needed illumination, and I just happened to be in a position to provide it as best as possible. Dude, it may turn out horrible. I don't think so. I think I was right. It seemed to work out for him. But
The deal is always in the buyer's mind.
That's true too, right? I think that's part of leadership too. Is it's okay to be wrong, but in that moment when there's opportunity, you have to act, and act with sincerity to the best interest of the group, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And we've spoken about this several times on This Life in Tech with TK. Leaders just need to be one decision away from the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't double down on a wrong decision, but make sure that when you pivot, you're pivoting in the right way.
Yeah, man. And if nothing else, at least go forward, right? I mean, keep the momentum. That's the most disastrous thing I could ever observe, is choosing to let momentum go away.
I wonder how many leaders and companies have failed because they chose to not move forward, that they went lateral or backwards, or even worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on, dude. We experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is really hard. By temperament, when you want to innovate, you need high functioning creative people. It just so happens that those people are the worst people at actually running a business. You need conservative, more closed-minded people to actually manage and maintain. And those two things are not the same. You're not going to find one person that is going to do both, very, very rarely.
Yeah, so imagine this, because you mentioned it. 4.5 years. And Elon Musk could have tweeted, don't use Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, use Silent Circle.
No.
Because we also had a phone. We had every aspect. A 4.5 year mistake. Company would only have been in business for a total of 6.5 years. That is timing. Sometimes when you have the great idea, the absolute perfect partner for you, but the timing isn't there. Whatever happens.
This is a really hard concept for people to grasp. It was hard for me. You can do everything right and still fail. There's just some things that are completely out of your control.
Yeah. So, Bruce Lee says in his teachings, do you want to be the fastest? Do you want to be the strongest? Or do you want to have the best timing? Because the best timing can counter strength and speed. Timing is everything.
Well, in a more modern incarnation, and I think there's a lot of parallels, that's the same philosophy more or less that Conor McGregor expresses.
Yeah. All right. By the way, is he winning this weekend? Is it this weekend?
No, next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend. Yeah.
Listen, man.
Does he beat Dustin?
I don't think he's wrong. I don't think he's that wrong in his prediction of 60 seconds.
I think he beats him in the first round. It's not 60 seconds. I don't think so. I think, but mainly because I don't think Dustin engages him. I think Dustin runs around, and it's going to take a little while for Conor to cut off those angles. If Dustin, look, every person that has moved forward against Conor.
Keep talking. I got to turn this beep off.
Yeah, sure. Every person that has moved forward against Conor has lost in the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, dude, you could. I listened to Dan Hardy. I love Dan Hardy. He fought GSP. That was like his last big fight.
Yeah,
right?
he was a former contender, right? He was a number one challenger to GSP.
Yeah.
GSP is arguably the best of all time.
But what I really like is he has really cogent fight breakdowns, man. He's really intelligent in how he analyzes it. And I listened to he does like a UFC show with his co-host when he does the UFCs at ringside. That's a little gimmicky, But he does his own now, which is much more in depth. It's just him, and man, he did a phenomenal breakdown of it. Um, I this is one of those things, right? As a leader, you have to recognize. I think there are far more ways in which Connor can win than Dustin. Dustin has like one, maybe two ways to win. That's his outs. You would put it in poker terms, right? His pot odds are not good. He only has like one or two outs.
Yeah,
And Connor's holding half a dozen.
easily. Right. And this is how good I think Conor McGregor really is. Okay. People can dispute it all they want. Floyd Mayweather is arguably the best boxer of all time, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
every
easily.
and every single one of Floyd's rematches, because he fought you and it was close and he got the win. When he rematched you, you got destroyed. Okay. Every time Connor has fought a second time, so to speak, like Nate Diaz is much, much bigger than Connor. Connor is fighting up a weight class he should not. Connor needs to be down a weight class, and is not. He's fighting up. Nate Diaz is huge compared to Conor McGregor. And
Yeah.
basically, Connor picked him apart that second fight. That's my opinion. I think he picked them apart. And if they were truly in the same weight class, I mean, they fought at 170.
Mhm.
That Nate Diaz really should be competing at 170, just like his brother Nick. That's where they should be fighting. McGregor should be fighting at 145. He's up at 155, but that's where he should be fighting.
I like him at 155. I think he has good overall balance there. 145 is a tougher cut, but I mean, you saw what happened, dude. 13 seconds.
No one. Jose Aldo is a beast. He didn't lose for what, 5 years or something like that? It was some crazy.
He was the first and only champ in that division until Conor McGregor stiffed him in 13 seconds.
Yeah.
It's too much power. Listen, man, if you've never boxed or fought and you've never been hit by somebody that has power like that, it'll wake you up fast. Unless you get put to sleep.
I mean, yeah, you get put to sleep fast, and then you felt like you woke up, right?
Yeah.
So I think
it's bizarre,
right, and that's why I think Nurmagomedov does not want to fight Connor again, because Nurmagomedov only has one way to win: get you on the ground, which he is phenomenal at doing.
Mm-hmm.
He gets you on the ground, and then he'll either submit you or beat you up, but he's got to get you to the ground,
right?
I think if Connor fought him again, I don't think it would be the same result. I think Connor wins. I think Connor has done nothing but ground fighting, so to speak, in the for like the majority of his time in the event, because he's hoping to get that rematch.
People don't understand what happens when you take somebody that has that temperament and personality and they become obsessed with an idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's potent. And so that's the Mayweather example. People want to poo-poo it, and Connor lost, and he lost fair, right? He had never boxed before professionally. He'd never fought at that level. He went 30 minutes with the best of all time. And in that second round, I think it was the second or the third, dude,
he rocked him. He
was hitting him with that touch of death. And it could have gone the other way. Credit to Floyd for having supreme defense, which, I mean, that's always been his thing. He went 30 minutes.
Well, it was his thing once he turned to Money Mayweather. But when he was Pretty Boy Floyd.
That's right. Well, and so people also forget that Mayweather, in his next fight, fought the best kickboxer in Japan and starched him in a round and didn't train for that fight.
Yeah, it wasn't even close, dude.
No.
And Floyd's like our age, okay? It's like maybe even older than us. So this is why I go, I think Connor wins against Nurmagomedov a second time. Now, taking nothing away from Nurmagomedov, I don't know what would happen if there was a third fight. Does Nurmagomedov take the same level of discipline to then provide a better stand-up to where then it keeps Connor off balance. A fighter
Right.
that can keep Conor off balance wins. Because he doesn't know, are you going to stand up? And they take, which is why GSP did so well. People think because GSP has such an amazing takedown, they forget he's a karate guy.
That's right. and he was up until Matt Hughes armbarred him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he became the world's best wrestler.
Absolutely.
Because that's what happens when you take that personality and temperament and they become obsessed with an idea.
Right. Don't, people, they think Conor isn't been working on that ground game. Don't underestimate him. You'll get knocked out.
The word on the street is he's back in form.
Well, this is what made Chuck Liddell so dangerous. I mean, look, Randy, come on. Okay. So Nurmagomedov, yeah, okay, you're good. You're not Randy Couture good.
No.
And Chuck Liddell, after he lost the first time, became obsessed with takedown defense.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't want to get taken out. Because if he could stand up, I mean, he got old, but
Yeah. Well, but that happens in that game. But that's the idea, right? And so you're talking about people that have true one punch power, dude. That's otherworldly. It's strange to get hit like that, man. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same. And you can poo-poo it, you can dismiss it, but I've been hit like that, man, and it doesn't feel right. Like, I don't like getting hit anyway. Like, it's not like an enjoyable experience, but it's part of the game, right? But when you get touched by that kind of power, it's not something you really want again. And see, that's the problem now. Is remember, Conor beat Dustin in the first round last time and knocked him stiff. And Dustin's been knocked out several times since then by the same type of fighter.
Dustin, I don't think. Okay, they always have a puncher's chance, right?
Sure,
can always happen.
Sure.
But Conor is just a magician when it comes to that stand-up.
Dude, he will get you onto that left hand. You're gonna get hit.
And look, Cowboy. People want to poo-poo all over Cowboy Cerrone. Dude, that guy has won more fights in the UFC than anyone else. He has the most knockouts than anyone else. What are you talking about? And he has the most leg kick knockouts, right? Cowboy Cerrone was always just a bad timing for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's back to timing.
Yeah, and he was just always that close. He's like the Buffalo Bills in the 90s, right? That dude was so good to get to the championship 4 times, but couldn't win it.
Yeah.
And I remember the press conference. It was, and it still sticks into my mind when Cowboy says, something along the lines of, "I'll stick that Lucky Charm up your ass" or something like that. And Conor's like, do something. Well, Now we fast forward, and Cowboy's much bigger than Conor as well. It is, Cowboy should be fighting at 170. That dude has fought down as low as 145, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do well at 145.
No.
Cowboy does well at 155. I think that's where he needs to be. Just like I personally think Conor should be at 145. I know you think he looks good at 155, but at 145, Conor would never have lost. Never have lost. He would have retired the champ, and then there would be everyone would just be saying Mystic Mac, Mystic Mac.
Yeah. See, but I like the courage.
Oh yeah.
To step outside of what you know. I'm not going to say is a sure thing, but let's call it a comfortable thing. Because I don't think anybody's surviving that left at 145. They're too small. And they don't have any power. Right?
Max Holloway, who, is a beast. Jose Aldo. All these people, even Dustin. Dustin was, in line for the championship. And then Conor humiliated him.
Yeah. Listen, people forget how good Eddie Alvarez was.
Oh my gosh.
And he got schooled. and Connor's talked about this. I'll finish with this, man. We'll talk about power because it's one of the things I liked about the mechanics of boxing and MMA is this science of power and how people produce it because it's mystical. There's no, you can't scientifically say this person has this much power. They just have it or they don't. And there's frame differences, there's bone structure differences, right? But you have power or you don't. And I remember Connor saying one time, when I hit people and I knock them out, their life is changed and they're never the same. And look at Aldo. Perfect example. After that fight, he has never, ever been the same. Dustin isn't.
Where's Eddie Alvarez today?
Yeah, right.
Jose Aldo went down a weight class, did well for a couple of fights, but it was too much of a cut for him, and then got knocked out like 2 or 3 times in a row.
Yeah, man, it's scary. It's one of those things where, like, okay, so like you and I have been around certain types of people like TK and those guys, right? And sometimes I stand back and I'm like, it's kind of strange that we're the same species because we're just so different. We're different psychologically and we're different physically, right? That kind of power to me is strange in the same way. Like, it's really strange that somebody has that ability to just touch you and put you to sleep. And there's nothing, you can't really do anything about it. Like, you can think you're going to do something about it, but you see what Connor does to people. Just like Ronda Rousey, you knew what was coming, but you're helpless. You can't stop it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it comes back down to, again, timing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conor McGregor is long for his size because he's like 5'8", 5'9", something like that, right? And he's long for that, and his bone density is quite high. But there's been plenty of people that are like that. It just also happens to be his timing.
Yeah.
Because that which is a mental hand-eye coordination, fast twitch, boom. It's all 3 of those things in combination as to what makes him lights out. And look, Nate Diaz is a phenomenal boxer who walks around at like 200 plus pounds. Conor McGregor probably walks around at 170, maybe 175. Like, he doesn't have to lose weight for 170. Okay. Nate Diaz has to lose weight for 170, and he knocked Nate Diaz down I don't know how many times. If they fought
the second fight, it was 3 or 4 times over the rounds.
Yeah. If they had fought at 155, Nate Diaz is decimated because he may get back to 170, but he's not back to 190 or 200. Right. You're not putting that much on in one night.
And so this is back to leadership. Credit to Connor's coaching team, because at an early stage, they figured out he has this very special weapon, and it's very special, that left hand. And so we're going to lead him and construct the whole rest of his game and engineer it so that he can get people onto that left hand. And he has about 2 or 3 different ways to deliver it. And you've seen it over the fights, how he does it. If you pay attention, you can't help but fall into it because of the way he makes you react to it. And everything is engineered for that moment.
Right. But, and then they start, and then now they got to worry about the shoulder. And he's always had the kick, right? He's always had kicks. Like,
I've seen people do like the little shoulder chuck, and usually what they do is they try to create the separation to get an elbow in. Randy Couture used to do that.
Right. The dirty boxing.
I have never, since I've watched MMA since UFC 1. I've watched all the Pride fights, all the UFC fights, all the WEC fights, everything. I have never, ever seen somebody offensively deploy a clavicle shoulder blade and break somebody's nose and knock them out. I've never seen it, dude. And listen, if you watch it, I don't think he invented that in the moment. I think that was something that they planned for, and they constructed that, and they rehearsed it, and they rehearsed it, and they rehearsed it.
100%. Why? Because Cowboy is a good kickboxer. That he likes to get in that clinch because Cowboy is bigger than Conor.
Yeah.
And if I'm bigger than you, I'm going to use that to instill my will upon you in the clinch. If I can get you in that clinch and I can get that, like Joe Rogan did to those guys on Fear Factor.
It's called a Thai plum grab.
You get that, like,
See, that's
And
another thing too, man. Do you remember back in the day? I'm going to go off for a minute now. Do you remember when Rich Franklin was the champion and he fought Anderson Silva that first time? If you haven't seen that, people, go back and watch that and look at the look on Rich Franklin's face when he gets grabbed by Anderson Silva in that Thai plum grab. Dude, you ain't getting out of that. And when somebody starts fucking elbowing you and kneeing you from that,
so people that don't know, Rich Franklin was a beast.
dude, he was a monster.
And he won the UFC. Is that middleweight or welterweight? I always get them mixed up, but it's the 185 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
He did it training part-time because he was a full-time like math teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah. Right. And
Yeah.
so he was a beast.
Yeah.
That's how good Anderson Silva was. You talk about the Matrix.
Yeah.
It was Anderson Silva. He was basically unbeatable during that time frame. Like people just could not touch him. Chael Sonnen took Anderson down, beat him up for 4 rounds and 4 minutes and 47 some seconds.
Yep.
And then Anderson slipped him, choked him out, done.
Yep.
So I think that's the great part, in terms of ending this on leadership. You have to be adaptable. You have to know what you're up against, and have your game plan that is capable of seeing and adapting to scenarios that will also change just as fluid as what you need to. The things are never static. And if your game plan is not fluid enough, you'll get tapped out just like Chael Sonnen did against Anderson Silva.
When you know the way broadly, you can see it in all things.
Well said, my friend.
That
is the way.
That is the way.
Yeah.
That is the way.
Well, my friend, it was good catching up. Good seeing you again. Were you drinking kombucha today?
No, I was having a little bit of my favorite, the Arrogant Bastard.
Arrogant Bastard, my Sunday evening beer. Well, I was drinking from Downslope Distilling.
There you go.
My mentors out there in Denver teaching me how to make the good spirits. But anyway, thanks for chatting.
Thank you.
See you again next Wednesday.
Yes.
When are we going to have you in on a Sunday?
Depends on what time you guys start, but I'm
7 a.m.
I can probably do that.
All right. Who knows what kind of shenanigans we get into?
Yeah, I'll have to let you know. We have some school events, oddly enough, on Sundays. But I think those in February. I'll let you know.
Yeah, anytime. All right, my friends. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have any topics you'd like, the Ninja and myself to talk about, hit us up on in the comments. Twitter, the real J Pittman, Nostradamus. Thanks for stopping by with some whiskey. Take care.
See you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.